Not a fan.
Okay.
By the way,
Yeah.
I should mention that this Merceau, which is typical of Merceaus, is $90 a bottle. We're ready to add another recipe to the database. The recipe this time is chicken Francese. It's a New York Times cooking recipe, and they say it's their most popular recipe. We made it, tasted it, and it is really delicious. So we're really happy to add it to the database. Now, to get started, we went to the marketplace to find out what people are pairing with this dish right now. And we got some interesting findings. Most often, people came up with this group of wines, Chardonnay. Some of the answers were French Chardonnays, some Italian, but the one thing that we got most often was Chardonnay was the answer. We tasted these guys with a dish and got some really surprising results. We also got some answers that came up just once in all of our asking, and that's this group here. We tasted these guys and got some interesting results. And finally, we used our process and came up with a surprising wine that we think is fantastic with this dish. That wine is this group over here, and that's Albariños. So, we're going to show you what we did. Hi, I'm Tracy Gardner, and welcome to Pairing Base. I'm here with
Irene Miller. I'm the beverage director at Lincoln Ristorante.
Irene is not just beverage director, she's beverage director now, but prior to that, she spent time as a chef at some of the best restaurants in the country. So she's got a great food palate. In addition to that, she's risen through the ranks of sommelier world, working at one place that I think is the best place in the world to be a sommelier when it comes to food and wine pairing, and that's Le Bernardin. So it's fantastic that Irene is here helping us taste these pairings, and we really have confidence in her palate and her comments on these pairings. I mentioned before that we went out into the marketplace and asked a bunch of people in wine stores which wines they pair with this dish, which wines they think would taste fantastic with this dish. We got a bunch of ideas, and we tasted all those in a different session. We tasted all together maybe about 25 wines or so in the first round, and those are really just the ideas we got from the marketplace. Some of those ideas gave us surprising results, so we're going to taste some of those for you here to talk about what we got. Like I mentioned earlier, the typical answer for this dish is Chardonnay. If people don't know the dish, they'll ask you, what's in the dish? And when you say, well, it's chicken cutlets in a lemon, butter, and wine sauce, most people say, oh, I know what. You need a Chardonnay because you want something lemony to go with the lemon sauce, or you want something buttery to go with the butter sauce. So we got some Chardonnays. We tasted those and got something really interesting. Irene ordered the wines so that we taste wines from sort of less amount of character to more. The Chablis should not have oak, so you're not going to have oak in your palate, and the Merceau should have lots of oak. And so that's why we're in this order. One answer that came up, again, was Chablis because it's lemony. Do you want to add anything to why people recommended Chablis for this dish?
Well, I think because it's crisp and mineral driven, and it's got this, this kind of lean quality to it that should technically cut through the richness of the butter, right, but also enough bright acidity to match the lemon in the dish. Mm-hmm. I think that's typically why that answer comes up.
Right. And when you say that, I think the guy in the store mentioned this as a crisp, lemony Chablis.
Yeah.
So let's give this a taste for the dish and see what happens. Taste your dish.
I think it's sort of the same and the same.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's not. I don't think they clash. It's lemon and acid, and this dish is also lemon and acid. So it's not really bringing anything interesting, or adding a layer of flavor.
Oh yeah, absolutely agree. You definitely you get the acidity, which is refreshing, without a doubt. You get the lemon. I get something in the middle kind of that's not so pleasing. I'm not sure what that is. It could be like there's a flavor crash somewhere that's creating a bad taste. Or it could be there's a tiny bit of oak that's coming out. I'm not sure. Do you think this is like zero oak in this wine? Or zero neutral oak? Or a little bit, nothing?
I think it's possible it's oaked.
Okay.
But I think if it is, it's all neutral barrel. It's so very old.
Okay.
Only to sort of soften and change the texture a little bit, not to influence the flavor at all.
Right. Okay. So this, would you say, is not bad, but not exciting?
Correct.
Okay. This is the Chablis. Again, a lot of times people mention that because it's the typical answer for lemony dishes, but we know we can do better than that. Another idea that came out tons of times was white Burgundy. This guy is a white Burgundy. Recommended again because it would be lemony and crisp. And I think the guy in the wine store said it was lightly oaked. So we'll see what happens with the dish. What do you think?
Well, I think the wine has more character. I do think it adds a little, like there's some citrus in there, but it's not just lemon. So I do think it adds some complexity to the dish. And I actually think it's like the wine's a little fuller bodied than the Chablis. And so I think it's got a little bit of a roundness that I think works with the dish. Does it blow my mind? No, but I think it's it's okay. Yeah, it's okay. It tastes good.
Right. Right. Yeah, this wine, we tasted in our previous sort of what I call the mega tastings, where we tasted about 20 or so wines in one session. And it was the only white Burgundy that we decided was okay. If you insisted on serving a white Burgundy to your friends, then this is the one I think we'd recommend, even though we have more exciting stuff in store for you. But this was, if you want to play it safe, you can go this way. Another one I want to taste for you is a Merceau. The story here, you get fantastic stories when you go out to the stores and ask for recommendations. The story here was almost a knee-jerk when I told them what the recipe was. Knee-jerk was, oh, you want butter. You want a buttery wine with that dish. So they grabbed this Merceau. It has a reputation for being rich, opulent, buttery, can be buttery. So we'll taste it with the dish and see what happens. What do you think, Irene?
I think they're not terribly compatible.
Absolutely.
I don't find this wine super oaky, but there's something about the fruit quality there that I don't think works with the lemon in the dish. Yeah, it's a little incongruous.
I'm going to say that's an understatement.
Yeah.
These two are really bad together. What we saw happen when we did the big tasting was that the dish takes whatever amount of oak is in the wine and dials it up. And there are two levels it can dial it up to. One level is it can just make the oak more apparent. So you're left with a taste of oak in your mouth, in there with the lemon and the richness of the butter. The other thing it can do is if it's more oak than that, is create bitterness. And what I got from these two wasn't the taste of oak, but was this really nasty bitterness in my mouth that is not what you want from a good pairing. I was talking to someone earlier today and talked about how a good pairing should be as much pleasing stuff as possible and as little displeasing stuff as possible. And this wine, I think, brings a lot of displeasing stuff to the experience.
Phenolic bitterness at the finish.
Yeah, that could be it. Yeah. But it's big. It's not a subtle sense. It's pretty big and obvious in your mouth, I think. So, not a fan.
Okay.
By the way, I should mention that this Merceau, which is typical of Merceaus, is $90 a bottle. So, great wine store, expensive wine, does not get your friends sitting back at your dinner party applauding your amazing pairing prowess. Maybe was I harsh on that?
No, I think that's in line with what you said before, for sure.
Okay, I did come out kind of hard on the wine. I wasn't too nice to it, but that's what I got. So
well, certainly it'll go beautifully with something else.
Yeah, it's a fantastic wine, just not with this dish. We'll get into our wild card category. An idea that came up only once was Sancerre. I was skeptical. And so we'll taste it for you and show you what we got.
Well, I think the thinking behind it is that Sancerres are typically very citrusy and herbaceous. Yeah. And you might imagine that the citrus in the dish would work nicely with the lemon in here. Right. It's got the bright acidity to cut through the richness, and a little bit of herbaceousness to sort of match up with the parsley that's on the dish. So that's probably what that person was thinking.
You were not there, but I think you're absolutely right. That's absolutely right. And I think on a very simplistic level, it's the thinking is butter sauce, coat your palate, very rich. You need tons of acid, and Sancerre is known for having tons of acid. So let's give us the idea. And you're right, the parsley pick up the herbal notes.
In fact, even though there's butter in this dish, it's not really a butter sauce.
Right,
It's really not that rich.
Right.
You need that little bit of butter to kind of round it out.
Right.
I think.
I think there are 3 levels that really matter to getting a great pairing. One level is knowing the dish. A lot of people I talked to did not know this dish. Some of the previous dishes we did, everyone was very familiar with how the thing tastes. We did steamed lobster.
Right.
Everyone knows how steamed lobster tastes.
Right.
When I talked to people about this dish, tons of people were not familiar with it. One guy I talked to in the wine store immediately thought, Italian pasta dish, you want a Sangiovese. And I'm like, no. I don't think you want Sangiovese with this dish. And so he actually went to a website and did some research and thought that a better wine would be something white. The next level is you've tasted the dish and you come up with a recommendation. I think there, the likelihood of success is higher, but not the highest. The third level, though, is once you've tasted the dish with the wine. I'm going to say that if you've tasted the dish and the wine together, your chances of coming up with a great pairing are the highest it could possibly be. Because the wine interacts with the food residual in your mouth, it changes, creates a different taste in the wine, and you have to have that experience to know whether it's an experience you want to recommend to someone or not. So finally, let's taste the Sancerre. Oh, you've tasted it 3 or 4 times already.
I've tasted it a couple of times. I mean, I think the acid level is there. I think the weight of the wine is there. It could have maybe just a touch more body. I feel like the herbaceousness here takes over a little bit.
Absolutely. And are you left with bitterness after you saw the wine?
A little bit.
Yeah.
A little.
Yeah, I'm left with the bitterness after I swallow the wine. And what I think you want from a great pairing, great pairings I've tasted, pairings I've loved a lot, where once you swallow the wine, you've got nothing in your mouth at all. There's nothing producing weight, no food or wine in your mouth, but there's just this flavor. If it's a great flavor, just kind of hanging there weightlessly, that's super, super pleasing. If it's a bad flavor hanging there, it's distracting, and you kind of like I keep focusing on that sort of bitterness in my mouth. I'm not happy at all with that.
Well, it's all about balance, I think.
Yeah.
And so a little bit of bitterness is fine. Maybe you need some bitterness to counteract, sweetness or something like that.
Right.
But it just depends. It just depends on the balance.
Right. And the bitterness, I think, is not welcome. This dish is really a soothing, almost comfort foody dish. And there's no place at all here for bitterness, I don't think.
I think because the acidity is actually a little high on this dish.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think you're left with sharp and then astringency.
Right. Yeah, I think you and I were both surprised when we first tasted this dish because the lemon is like way out front. Right, it's a super lemony dish. So there's no shying away from that. Another idea that came up was Pinot Grigio.
Well, I think Pinot Grigio is typically a very kind of simple, clean, super fresh wine.
Right.
Everybody knows Pinot Grigio.
Right.
It's never or very rarely offensive.
Right.
It gives you what I like to call white wine flavor, but doesn't necessarily have a whole lot of character to it. But I think the fact that this is a fairly simple, clean dish, I can imagine that perhaps Pinot Grigio would be sort of a go-to for some people.
Right, I think it's exactly what the store was thinking. You want something recognizable and something safe. And,
Pinot Grigio is always safe.
Right. The funny thing with this dish is that people aren't sure whether it's a French dish or an Italian dish. Because it's a French, I would say a French preparation to some extent, with an Italian pronunciation.
Right.
So no one knows. So they don't know whether to go French recommendation or Italian recommendation. In this case, I think they said, well, I'm going to go Italian and I'm going to go basic, safe Italian.
Right.
So we'll see what happens.
And the idea that, sort of the regional idea, like what grows together goes together.
Exactly.
Sometimes true, sometimes not.
Exactly. And?
Not offensive.
Right.
Not offensive
Right.
is the best I can say.
Right.
Fine,
Right.
it's fine.
Right. When we evaluate these pairings, we have 3 levels at which they can perform. They can be amazing, really exciting, incredible, and we call that a 1. They can be bad, maybe it creates something awful in your mouth, which happens a ton of times, and that gets a -1. Sometimes, though, something in the middle happens, and that is nothing at all, where it's just boring. And the pairing just it never takes off. And I think this is a great example of a 0, when it's just boring. It doesn't do anything for you.
The problem here is Pinot Grigio is typically very low in acid. And you really, like we talk about it constantly, but you really need some acidity in this dish. If you have a wine that doesn't have as much acid as the dish has, the dish and the wine are both going to seem flat, kind of flabby. Right.
Yeah, I don't know if you agree with this, but a lot of times when I've tasted pairings, I think you always want to go brighter than the dish with the wine. You want a wine that's brighter than the dish.
Yeah.
And that way, when you introduce the wine to the mouth, you get something exciting and lively.
Yeah. And fresh, and the acidity clears the palate as well.
Exactly. Cool. Now we're going to go on to a couple of wines we found from our process. We tasted tons and tons of wines, and we did several iterations to try to find out what we loved best. At one point, we threw Albariño in the mix of the wines we were tasting, really because Irene had this great idea. We talked about what is going to make the dish even better. If you were to add a component to this dish, what would that be and how would it make it better? Irene's idea was she wanted to add capers to the dish. Oh, yeah. You thought the salinity of the capers would be something that would increase the complexity of the dish. I'm going to use the phrase that Irene introduced me to, layers of flavor. It would add another welcome layer of flavor to this dish. Yep. And so that's sometimes how I look at pairings. You want a wine that's going to add another layer of flavor to the dish or further develop the composition of the dish. And so I looked for some wines that would have some salinity. And we were surprised that the Albariño we really liked, but it wasn't because of the salinity. It was because the Albariño brought out some elements of layer flavors around the lemon flavor. Again, this dish leaves a lot of lemon in your mouth. And what Albariño we thought did was add some richness and complexity around that basic sort of linear lemon flavor. Yeah. So let's taste these guys and see what happens. And I should mention here that once we saw that sort of trailhead that Albariño was interesting with this dish, we then went and tasted tons of Albariños to find out which one among those was even the best of the bunch. So this was one of the ones that was in the running, but was not what we found that was the best of the bunch.
I think it's good. Mm-hmm. This wine for me has a lot of peach characteristics, but they're subtle. I do think it adds some complexity to it. Not that I would normally say that peaches and chicken Francese go together, but it does add a nice sort of fruit dimension, especially when you take a bite of the dish with a little bit of this lemon rind. The lemon rind really makes, really makes the difference here. What I do get
when I take a sip of this wine is I get that acid you want to refresh your palate, freshen your palate. But it's not just acid, it's acid plus some weight and maybe some flavor as well. Some concentration of flavor that is better and more pleasing, I think, than a simple acid taste. Yeah. And so when that came into my mouth compared to the other wines, I was happier with it. And nothing bad happened at all when it came into my mouth. So I think that that's what you want.
I think the weight. Yeah, I think the weight here is nice.
Right. Yeah. Again,
it's not heavy. It's still medium-bodied. Right. But it does have sort of a richness of fruit that I think works here.
Right. And I think that's different from everything else we tasted. This kind of like somehow the texture and the acid and the flavor, the citrus flavors, all connected, all came in together. So it was very cool. Very cool. This was something that told us that Albariño was interesting. It is not what we found was the best of the Albariños we tasted. So we're going to give this a taste. This is an Albariño that we thought was the best of the bunch. Are you checking to see if it was clean or just to see what it
I like to smell the wine first.
Okay. Why do you do that?
I just think it's because what I always do as a sommelier is to smell and taste the wine first.
Right. Now, when I did the WSET program, the first thing they want you to opine on is whether the wine is clear and clean.
Mm-hmm. Of course.
And so clear, hold it to light, is it clear? Clean, is it free of any faults? And you sniff to see if it's free of any faults. So I wasn't sure if that's sort of the habit.
No.
Okay.
And I mean, always a sommelier will always check for faults. That's the first thing they're looking for. Right. Because you don't want to pass that on to the guest.
Of course not.
Yeah, there's a nice fruit character to this wine. There is a little bit of peach here, I think, but there's also some citrus, but maybe a little bit more like orange zest. Mm-hmm. But I think that kind of builds on the flavor of this dish.
Right. I think you're right. I think there's, I think that the promise of the Chablis was that it would bring acid and lemon. Mm-hmm. And I think what we've found is that it's more interesting and more pleasing if you bring texture, a complex array of lemony and citrusy, sort of bright citrusy flavors to the experience, and acid to the experience. And that's what these Albariños do more than these other wines we tasted do. Yeah,
it's got the acid. I do get this nice kind of mineral finish to the wine as well that I think for me is working. For me, it works with the coating on this dish because first it's breaded and then it's done in an egg wash and then in flour. I really find that the egg wash here brings a kind of mineral tone to the dish that I think this sort of nicely echoes.
Right. Really interesting. There's even like this is almost like a study in bright citrus fruit flavors. I get a little bit of maybe lime zest, maybe a little piece of grapefruit, but again, it's sort of taking that basic lemon thread and expanding on that to give it, again, layers of flavor that are more dimension. What was that? Dimension?
More dimension.
Yeah, and that's just something that makes a dish more pleasing. It's something that makes food more pleasing on the palate. So this is what we found. We found that the typical answer can be okay, but also can be problematic. And so you may not want the typical answer, which is Chardonnay. We found the one-off ideas where sometimes with a one-off idea you get something great. In this case, we didn't think you did. And in this case, well, not always, in this case, our process and our iterations took us to something that we like quite a bit, which is, again, totally unexpected. No one recommended, no one even got close to recommending Albariño. Right, and we were both really surprised. We do these, as you see, we do these tastings blind. We comment on which pairing we like best. And when we open the bag to see what the wine is, sometimes we're really surprised. And this time we were really surprised it was Albariño. So that's what we got. We're really excited to recommend Albariño, and specifically this Zarate Albariño with this dish. But check out the videos that tell you what to ask for in the wine store to get more about what you want to serve with this dish if you want to serve a fantastic pairing. Thanks a lot. And please provide a good ending. Check out all of our videos and all of our pairings, and don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. Thanks a lot. See you next time. Hey, be sure to check out the next video. In this video, we showed you the wine we liked best with chicken Francese. In the next video, we tell you what to ask for in the wine store if you can't find the wine that we like best.